Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back from the ad break. You are still tuned in to Prime Live, where we keep you well informed and we give you more insight into exactly what you actually need to be informed on. Now, we do know that a major TikTok ban in the US could impact around 160 million users of the TikTok app. But the approach by American content creators is centered around the potential loss of income. Now, only a handful of countries, including the US, Japan, Brazil, the UK, are compensated by the TikTok Creative Fund. But now South African content creators and those in the rest of Africa are demanding answers as to why they too are not being compensated. Now, this evening, I'm joined by South African influencer and founder of My Media Kit, Brendan Roberts. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on Prime Live.
Aisha, thank you so much for having me here.
It's a total pleasure. I want us to jump right straight into it. We do know that since April last year, you have amassed around 36 million views. 37 now. Congratulations. That's a big view from your TikTok content. So how do you feel that you have not earned a cent from it, given that an average American with that kind of viewership would be earning anything from like plus $10,000 a month from it?
So I must say I'm in the fortunate position to be the owner and founder of other companies. I have other income streams. So it does affect me, and obviously it would be really nice to have that extra income coming in, because if you look at it from a business perspective, if you looked at your content creation as an influencer or a content creator, if you looked at it as a business, because that is what it is these days, it is intellectual property, it is a business. So whether you are creating content for other companies or whether you're creating content and you're putting it out on your own social platforms, helping to drive influence or drive sales, or even just, sharing your own opinion in that, it's intellectual property, it's worth something. So from a business perspective, it is always rewarding to have that come back to you in the form of monetary value. And I think if you look at the timeline, the history of social media content creation, if we look at countries that have had the ability to have access to things like creator funds. So I've spoken before about YouTube championing the concept of a creator fund back in the day. And we've seen how that has taken creators on YouTube from zero following, zero income, to people like Mr. Beast, who are now worth billions of dollars with hundreds of millions in following. And we've seen that on a global scale, we've seen how creators and influencers that have had access to being compensated for their efforts to create content and to give time to these platforms, how that then rewards them, and they are then able to upgrade, they can buy new equipment, they can put more time and effort into creating it, they get better, and they draw more people onto the platforms.
And especially given the fact that if you look at Africa as a whole, we are a continent that struggles with employment and all of that. So this could be something that actually assists our economy. So now just jumping right back into it, one of your videos that has generated more than 100K views was mainly where you were challenging the TikTok CEO on the same issue that we're speaking about.
Well, we don't know whether he's the CEO anymore. There's
conspiracies. There's conspiracy. So whoever he is or whatever his position is, you were challenging him regarding the issue. Can you tell us exactly what you were expecting from this call?
So I must say, I at first didn't expect much. Obviously, on the home front, it has now reached national news, which I am extremely grateful for, to essentially be the voice of 17 million users in South Africa. And I then have now the backing of the majority of the African continent is now also joined in this call. So from a local perspective, we've now reached national media, which is fantastic. And on the global front, from a social media perspective, the call is being heard globally now. We have all of the countries that do not have access to the Creator Fund. They are now also saying, yes, we're behind this movement. Yes, we also want, there's calls to it coming from all over the place. There's a lady called Shahad, she's in the UAE, she's based in Dubai, and she's her voice has sort of met mine. So hers has sort of come down, mine has sort of gone up, and we've sort of been pinned as the two globally that are sort of pushing this movement the most. So, and then we've got some of the creators in the UK that are sort of like pushing the Commonwealth TikTok movement as well, because let's face it, when the US disappeared off of the app for all of 12 hours, we started seeing a lot of other creators that we had never seen before.
That is so true.
And it was fantastic to see it. And everyone was like, wow, there is value-driven creators all over the world, and this is what the rest of the world actually looks like.
But I think it's also sad that I think I came across some TikTok a few days back where this lady was also saying that she feels like, or I don't know if it's a fact though, that obviously the TikTok is pushing, or the algorithm pushes the US content compared to like other countries, which is something that's very sad. I mean, considering that Africans or even other countries that are not benefiting financially from TikTok, they're contributing so much to the platform, you know, that's actually very sad. But now that we have established that unfortunately we're not earning any money from it, how are you planning on helping content creators, or, you know, assisting them in making funds, or money from this? How can they monetize the platform?
So my goal has always been to empower content creators and influencers. I'm a creative myself. I don't believe that creatives get compensated nearly as much as what they do or what they should. So I try as best as possible to make available information for creators and influencers on my own social media platforms. There's been a very, very big driver of mine to make available the mistakes that I've made and the things that I've learned. I've tried to put out there so that I can say to people, okay, I've done this. It didn't work so well for me. Don't do it like this. And that is essentially what sort of came to a T, where last year in December, or just before December, we developed and launched a platform called My Media Kit, which essentially acts as a digital media kit for social media influencers and content creators, because when they want to work with brands on brand deals or endorsement deals, which is one of the only avenues that content creators in South Africa and on the African continent, it's one of the only ways that they are able to make money off of their content. So we created this platform to act as a professional tool to assist them in their negotiations with companies. So when companies ask you, can you share your social media stats with us, then the influencers can just send this to them and it will have everything up to date, nicely presented.
So in terms of content creators, do brands pay you based on the kind of viewership that you have, or like are there requirements for how many viewership you should have before you can approach brands? What is the story there?
So you get, I love how it's become it's a whole industry on its own. And back in the day, it was you were just an influencer. Now you can get nano influencers, micro influencers, celebrity level influencers. So we generally tend to sort of categorize influencers from 0 to 10,000 followers, and then from 10,000 followers to 100,000 plus. And then once you start breaking into the high 100,000s, millions of followers, then you consider a celebrity level influencer. And the ability to generate an income off of it is based off of your engagements that you get. So if you are someone that has a voice in a particular space and you're able to say, make a video about something, and people will change their mind based on what you're saying that they should do, or the brand that they should potentially align themselves with, that will very heavily play in your ability to generate an income and how much you can charge per video. But there is tiers. We do have tiers that most companies will work off of.
And how does someone actually become part of the company, or how do they reach you? How can they reach you guys?
So the platform itself is an online platform, so they can just go and search My Media Kit. It's in my bio on my social media, and they sign up, and it does everything for them. So it basically just gives them the tool. They log into all of their social media accounts, and then all their data is protected and it belongs to them.
That is so brilliant.
We can't see anything. I can just see the users that we have, that we have X amount of users, but I can't see anything. Our system processes the data and it's gated.
And it's protected. That is such a good platform. I mean, back to the US, we do know that Ben Bytes, ByteDance was accused of stealing users' data and is now being forced to sell to a US company. Should we be concerned about free speech? Is it under threat, or what is happening?
So The thing that people need to now understand is that social media has become a global network. It's no longer an isolated entity, if you want to call it that, or an isolated occurrence. Social media connects people from all around the world. So when you look at something like what people would consider free speech, it's very interconnected, because one person's free speech in their country might not look the same as another country's free speech, yet both will have access to the same social media platform. And I think the problem now is that the line between politics and free speech, and what governments would consider free speech and what they're trying to protect their citizens from, and what companies, private companies, are able to do on a global scale, the line between the two of them is becoming very blurred. And the problem with that is, if TikTok, for example, was an isolated platform and it only existed in the US, even if it were a Chinese-based company still, but let's say we took the rest of the world, the rest of the global stage out of the equation. If it only affected Americans, then if the US decided that they wanted to impose some kind of regulation, it would only affect US citizens. However, the problem now is that the US only accounts for 8.5% of the total users on TikTok. The rest of the world, there's 2 billion users on TikTok. There's only 160 million in the US. So I think the line becomes very blurred. And what worries me is that if the US can turn around and impose something that affects TikTok on a global scale, they're essentially affecting everybody's right to free speech. Because if they now had to take some kind of ownership within TikTok and they had to impose regulations, it would affect the global community. It would affect the global network. And that's just the way that it is. So personally, I don't think that they should have any ownership in it whatsoever, because right now as it stands, it is a global network.
No, definitely, you've raised such an important point, and a very good way of looking at it. It's very interesting. So now, how much do you think the #Free Palestine content played a role in the US TikTok controversy?
So if we look at the US, it's no secret that anytime something, any kind of movement, #Free Palestine or any other hashtag movement, if it is not aligned with their policies and their beliefs, then they do often take a stance against it. So it would not surprise me if something like that had a role to play in their wanting to impose these regulations and these bans and make a bit of a fuss about it. However, I think the bigger factor that's coming into effect right now is Donald Trump coming into office. And with him coming into office, obviously comes his position against China. So he's made it's not a secret that he is out to do anything and everything to put himself on the opposite side of the table to anything to do with China. And a lot of people need to remember that prior to him coming to office, he actually had a hand to play in the TikTok ban bill being passed. He had a hand to play in it. There's even an article that you can go and read online of his revolutionary change from wanting the ban to now saying that they can have some extra time. And I still think it's a political move. It is a move to try and exercise some kind of control over the US citizens. And I think if you look at it, it's basically just got to do with the fact that it's Chinese, in my opinion.
In your opinion?
I think it's just because it's there and because they can't control, because we've seen with things like Facebook and Cambridge Analytica in the past, the US loves to have some kind of control over things. And whether they like to admit it or not, we know that the US government has used Facebook to manipulate the US citizens and the global community before. So whether or not ByteDance has anything to do with the Chinese government, whether the Chinese government is or isn't spying, I said whether it's known or unknown, is completely irrelevant. it's basically because the US doesn't have control over this, and because it's something that the US citizens can use to see what's going on in the rest of the world.
Yeah, this is such an interesting conversation, but unfortunately we are running out of time. But before I let you go, I'm just going to ask you one last question. We've been speaking about, the significant change that we want to see in terms of like TikTok paying Africans and all of that. Can we just tell us about the significant change that you are seeing and how it will impact our continent should they actually pay, African content creators?
So our continent, the African continent, is such a diverse and rich continent. We have so much to offer to the global stage in terms of food, dance, music, culture. There's so much that we have to give. And the content creators on the African continent are very value driven. They want to bring value to their audience. That is their main goal most of the time. And if you look at what the ability or the having access to something like a creative fund, if you look at what it has done for other countries, you can't say that it wouldn't do the same thing for a country like South Africa that is extremely rich in creative minds. We have a very, very large creative space here in South Africa, industry. So if you look at it from that perspective, it is an economy. TikTok is an economy. It is a global economy. And if you look at the various countries that have access to it, those would then be the little micro economies. The US economy, TikTok economy, is very strong because they have full access to what the platform can offer. So their citizens are then, whether they are creators or whether they are just users and just watching content, they are incentivized in every way possible to either create the best content that they can and to keep creating content. And that then creates a situation where people would want to watch more of the content. In a country like South Africa, the content creators in South Africa are basically only using TikTok on the very bare minimum level that they can. It is, unless they are full-time content creators and they are only doing brand endorsement deals, they're signing 1 to 2 year endorsement deals, so they know that their expenses are covered for the long term. But a lot of the time people are creating content elsewhere and then just reposting it on TikTok and not creating content directly within TikTok, which makes a very big difference. So if we had access to something like a creative fund, you would immediately see creators in South Africa putting a lot more time and effort into creating content, because like I said in one of my videos, if I knew that my content qualified for something like a creative fund, I would always make sure that my content or a video was longer than a minute, because that's one of the qualifying factors for the TikTok Creative Fund in terms of videos. So I would always make sure that my videos are longer than a minute. Me making sure that my videos are longer than a minute equals more time on the platform that TikTok can then push to my viewers, which means that they keep more people on the platform, more ads, more revenue. So if they open the creative fund to the African continent, it would lift their entire floor and ability to create or generate revenue. It would lift it up proportionally, because it is an ecosystem and it is an economy. So an economy is only as strong as what people are willing to invest into it. Money in equals money out.
So it's a mutually benefiting.
It is a mutual. It would, if TikTok opened the creative fund, if TikTok opened the creative fund to the global stage, I think within a year to 2 years they would be the strongest social media platform on the planet.
I hope they're listening. But Brendan, thank you so much for this conversation. I think I learned a lot, and you gave us a different perspective on how to actually look at this and how important the issue actually is. It's not something small, and how it would actually benefit Africa as a continent, and also TikTok mutually benefiting. But thank you so much for giving us your time.
It's a pleasure. Actually, thank you so much.
Thank you. Viewers at home, that was Brendan. And I really hope that, you learned something from this, because I have. But we still have more coming up on INX Prime. Do make sure that you still interact with us at INX Prime on all our social media platforms and be part of the conversation. But without wasting any time, we will take a quick ad break. We still have more for you right after this.